Hey, hello there, John here. And as you probably saw in my YouTube videos, we talked about the art of the interview just the other night. That was part one. Now, I want to reemphasize that these webinars are for owners, of course, but they're also for managers, whether it be salon managers, district managers, regional managers, general managers. They serve everybody's purpose, really. And particularly this one on interviewing. And it's been a long road for me as far as working in the retail business. I've been in retail since I was 14, which is almost 60 years. That's why I look as old as I look. And I work for major Fortune 500 corporations, as you can see here on the screen. A little company called CBS, now Sony Music, and then Target Stores was a divisional manager for them. And it says there on the screen, and I don't know why my assistant put that one up there. It's my fault. I didn't check it. But it says that over the last 30 years in the tanning industry, I've consulted 473 different salon owners. That's incorrect. I've consulted now 547. And interviews, I've probably easily done 3,000 interviews over 52 years of managing people. And I haven't always done it right. And fortunately, I think I've learned from my mistakes and sometimes learned from the people I was interviewing. So the point of this is to continue on with part two of what I started in the other interview about trying to find better talent. And I think it's one of the most serious problems that tanning salons have right now, outside of COVID. Yes, COVID is the most serious problem. And we're all hoping and praying and crossing our fingers and asking for divine guidance that we don't have a massive shutdown for a long period of time. I know that in some states that there is some of that going on right now. I've heard other people say, which I'm glad to hear, that they're not going to close their salon until their governor specifically says tanning salons, not just everything but essential or just essential retail can stay open. So I'm glad that some of you or most of you are fighting at this time. You've probably already got up the plexiglass, you're already wearing the mask, you're always doing the X's if you're taking the precautions on your end to be good in society and cutting down on COVID. So I just hope that we can get through this and we get to this next peak season and really rock them, because I think last year was going to be a great year and COVID got in the way. Let's hope and pray it doesn't happen this year. So let's go back to what this is all about. And the most important thing that you're trying to do in interviewing is you're trying to find out what the real person is. And that's the goal of professional interviewing. And I mean professional, not to 15 minutes up at your front counter talking to somebody. That's not professional. I'm going to go into some of this in just a minute here. So that's the most important goal of interviewing, is discover the real person sitting in front of you. And I want to kind of go back for a second too and just remember that I was talking about protocol in part one of this series, where you don't want to be sitting in there with an interview with somebody as a judge. First of all, I wouldn't do it in a salon. If it's important to you, find the real person, and good people, you want them to let their defenses down and let you know who they really are, who that real person is. And that's what the big goal is. Because you look at this lady that's on the screen there. This is a lady whose image that we hired for my latest book, the Game Changer, Motivational Management for Retail Service Associates, which, by the way, is a free book when you join the Vault, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But anyway, so that's the object, is to find out the real person, because you look at that lady and she's got great makeup, and I'm moving my cursor around. Hair is pretty. She's, looks great. It's a nice image to have in a salon. But sometimes you get in and you start interviewing people, and if you take that image as your first decision, you don't know. You hope that this is the kind of a person that comes to work for you. You hope this isn't the kind of a person. Now, this is kind of an exaggeration, and I know that. And I used it in the last webinar, and I kind of like to show it because we have people that show up with lots of tattoos, and I'm not trying to take away from people's personal expressionism, that kind of thing. But remember, you're a professional indulgence service provider, and the people that work for you, they should be a professional as well. And you're trying to find out who that real person is. Now, let's talk about recruiting. And this is a busy slide here, I know, but let me kind of go through it a little bit. Okay, so questions people have asked me is, how often should I be recruiting for new employees? My answer is I would recruit all the time. You just never know when a person walks through the door, and they may be the answer for a lot of your selling issues because they're really, really killer salespeople. What we do as a habit in this industry, we tend to get a full staff and then we stop recruiting. We say, well, I'll take your resume or your application and I'll get back to you when we have an opening. Forget it. I mean, what happens is if somebody looks good, they're not waiting for you. And you don't know that bringing somebody in really good may help to bring everybody else up in the salon. Because if you have 4 or 5 employees, if they're all great, bless you. But if you have 4 or 5 employees and they're all great, don't assume they're going to stay with you forever. And later on in this series, I'm going to talk about, well, back to the motivational thing too, about how to keep good employees once you get them. Now, the question is, what recruiting resources should I use? I see people on the forums or hear people express, I use Indeed or ZipRecruiter or Craigslist or Career Builder. I've used Career Builder on occasion for clients to find, say, like a district manager or a regional manager or a general manager or whatever, and you have to pay for that. And typically, it seems like we get a little bit more professional applications. I would not use Indeed, Zip, or Craigslist. They're a waste of time. I would not use a window notice or a notice at your counter that says now hiring. I love to put this up. This is a pizza shop. Believe me, a professional service provider. Let's see, wherever you have your hair done, unless you go to Great Clips or one of those cheap cut rate hair cutting places, which I think that most of you that are going to be watching this probably don't do that. But this is a professional. You should be a professional indulgence provider. You're not pizza. You're not fast food. So that's why I've got the big X over it. All right. So then somebody has asked me about, and I'll tell you where to go to in a minute here. But somebody says, how about employee referrals? Now, employee referrals can work, but you have to be careful with it. You have to be careful who's doing the referral. If you pay a finder's fee for one of your good employees bringing somebody else that's good in, that's great. But there's also some caveats with that. You have to be careful that you don't end up with a clique in the store where you've got people that are all friends of each other that particularly love it when I'm dealing with a salon or a chain of salons that are college campus located, and you've got sorority sisters in there. I don't even want to go into that right now. But anyway, an employee referral can work. If you want to pay somebody $50 or $100 for bringing in a really good employee, but you have to be careful because the employee that's bringing this referral to you that wants that $50 or $100 finder's fee, are they themselves a good employee? So employee referrals, fine, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. And if an employee comes to you and says, hey, I've got this friend of mine who's really good and has been in retail or works at Victoria's Secret or works at a high-end restaurant where she gets bonuses and she gets fees from employees or customers rather, that's great, you know, but just make sure that they know that there's no guarantee that you're going to hire them and that you're going to look at them with a objective mind. And so you just have to be careful with employee referrals. Now, starting wages, that's another issue to talk about in recruiting, is that what do you offer as a starting wage for a great candidate? Well, I would say I would survey your market. What you have to pay in Chicago or Detroit or New York or Los Angeles is different than in a small city or town in one of the Midwestern states. It can make a large difference. I would survey your market for what other service retailers are paying. The federal national minimum wage, which just really astounds me, is still at $7.25. Don't even think about that. That's absurd. I'm guessing that in many markets, you're probably starting a really good employee at least 10 bucks, maybe 11 bucks an hour. Managers, probably $15, $16 an hour. And you're saying, well, how can I afford that? If you looked at the last interview, part one of the interview series, and you saw what I detail in there for you of a salon on their opportunity costs for not having good employees, believe me, you're going to pay through the nose if you bring in losers, not just in the money that you're paying on payroll that's wasted, but the monies that you're not making because they're not selling. So you have to, you don't want to talk about handing over this salon that you put together and put in all of these build out fees and nice equipment and all that, and hand it over to somebody who will work for sub competitive wages. Okay, so anybody that's watching this webinar right now, let me just assume, and I'm probably wrong with some of you, but I'm sure I'm right with a lot of you. Let's say that you're reliable, responsible, you've got mature decision making, you've got good interpersonal skills, you know how to sell, how to get your point approved by somebody else in a conversation. You're really good at all this stuff. Let's say that that's you that's watching this right now. Would you work for sub-competitive wages in a market? Would you work in Detroit? Would you work in Chicago? Would you work in Dallas for $9 an hour? No, you wouldn't. If you thought you were really good, if you take that job, if that person takes that job and they know they're really good, they're just taking it to get a paycheck until they get the next real job. So you got to be real, people, about what you're going to pay. You don't even hesitate to pay out thousands of dollars for good used tanning equipment, or even more so for new tanning equipment. You don't even hesitate with that. You don't hesitate to pay bigger per square foot fees for a good retail location, or for building it out and all of the refurbishing of it. And that you don't hesitate with that, because you know that this is stuff that customers want to see. But more important than any of that is that customers have to see an image similar to what I've got on my latest book. They don't all look like that, I understand. It could be somebody that's not quite as attractive, and maybe they're even a little bit overweight, but they've got to have that great natural warmth, which I talked about in the last webinar. Okay, so let's talk about, we can get this, yeah. Let's talk about where, when I said don't use Zipper, indeed, the best circle of candidates is your salon email. And why? Because there's less unknowns. You get somebody that comes in that hands in a resume or an application at your counter, or you go on Facebook or any kind of social media, whatever, and you get an application, somebody fills out an application, whatever. You don't really know a whole heck of a lot about it. But if you go to your email, you know, for one, that they like tanning. Why would they be on your email if they didn't? You know, the chances are they like your tanning. That's critical. You may get honest feedback in that interview from them of what they think of the salon, because they're your tanners. They probably live close to you. I mean, why is somebody going to drive 45 minutes to get a tan? So they live fairly close to you. You may have had some interaction time with them. You may know something about their personal life and communication skills. If they're a tanner with you, you can review how they're handling the mature handling of their account. So that's what you want. Somebody that likes tanning, likes your tanning, lives close to you. It reduces some of these excuses like, my boyfriend ate my car or whatever. So now we're talking about what to do to see the real person, to get to that rock star. So again, as I mentioned this in the last one, set up a non-authoritarian seating. Don't be sitting like a judge behind this big monolith desk. Maybe you don't even have one, and I would always thank them for coming in for the interview. You want people to feel that they have just as much right to make a decision to work at your salon as you do to seriously consider their candidacy. It's just two people sharing their thoughts when they get together, and that's what makes for a powerful interview. Offer the refreshment, I talked about that, and I would look at their resume or their application and find what do they have as a parallel to your background. So you can kind of start the interview about saying, I see you went to this high school, or you're from this particular area or whatever, and come up with something that you know of that is commonality to them. You want people to have something in common with you. This is what you do when you're selling too. Somebody comes into the salon, you want some commonality with them as well, but you certainly do when you're interviewing and hiring. Okay, so I talked about interviewing in private outside of the salon. I talked in the last part about open-ended questions, not like, do you like working with people? That's silly. I don't even want to talk about that. And then with all your questions, be prepared for what we call additional probing. Now, in the vault, which is a membership section that's on my website, johnrfarr.com, there is my list of 42 questions, and it kind of gives you some a little bit of thoughts about what you should do to probe off of that initial question's response, because sometimes they give you an answer and you don't want to just leave that answer. You want them to give you more information. So before we get to some of that as examples, some of the interview approaches that do not work. I've had salons tell me that they use the tribunal approach, where they have 3 or more interviewers in the same room with a single interviewee. Don't do that. That's just crazy. Again, if you want people to lower their defenses and tell you who they really are, don't put them in front of a jury. I don't know who came up with that silly idea. I mean, I've been in human resources for 52 years. It doesn't work. Also, the Jeopardy approach. The Jeopardy approach is, instead of 3 interviewers, you have 1 interviewer or 2 interviewers, and you have 3 candidates fighting each other. It's silliness. Don't do that. And just as silly, I saw it used in the movie Wolf of Wall Street, and people have, you'll see selling courses that go back years ago that have used this. Here, take this pen and sell this to me. Ridiculous. Silly, 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 silly. All you do is you get somebody that might be full of BS, can think on their feet, but it doesn't mean they have natural warmth and can connect with the customer. Remember, we're not going to sell the customer once. We're going to sell them many times. You don't need some flim-flam artist that jumps in and tells you how to sell a pen. That's baloney. Most important thing is to have them crazy about the tanning business itself, reliable, responsible, all that kind of stuff. Anything that comes to selling, specifically lotions or EFTs, if they've got the personality, we can teach them that. Don't start selling them the job before you're sold. So when you get into the interview in the first 5 minutes, you don't start talking about how wonderful it is to work at your salon. You don't know if you want to hire them. So you got to get them to talk to you first about the questions and the additional probing questions you have before you start talking about what a wonderful place it is to work. Also, I mentioned before, don't do at-the-counter interviews. You want to interview in private, and yet I know some people do it. Well, John, I just don't have time. No, you have time. You don't take the time. And look at down there the research that we've done. Length of industry average interviews about 28 minutes. Conversation time to buy, or consideration time to buy a new or newly used tanning bed is about 3 hours. And yes, that bed is expensive, but the person working for you costs you in payroll and opportunity costs if you don't do it right. Now, as far as the standard, when you get into questions, there's what the legal community calls the standard of appropriateness. You have to ask yourself, does this question I'm about to ask pertain to the application's capabilities to perform the core job duties? That's really what's important. You got to stay away from, of course, race, gender, age, family, health. Why would you want to know about someone's intentions for their family or know anything about their family? And they'll say, well, then I have to know if they have 3 kids, then I got to know how they expect to get there. You can't ask them that. It's illegal for you to. That's age discrimination and employment lack. Age Discrimination and Employment Act. One of my major studies for my master's degree was employment law. You can't ask that. Eventually, they may volunteer that information to you, but you want somebody that can perform the core job duties. And what does any of this have to do? Well, family might keep them from being there to perform the core duties. That's not for you to make up that decision. when you hire them, because you think they're the best candidate. If they don't show up, then you get into a whole warning system, which is part of progressive discipline. I just don't touch it because it's a good way to get sued. And remember, if you get sued, and anytime there's a lawsuit, particularly an employment law lawsuit, when an attorney wins, he or she wins. When they lose, they win. Lawyers never lose. Okay, so here, how about some good in-person interview questions to find some commonality? So a good probing question added to most of their answers is, and this is what you want to say. You ask the question, they give you an answer, and you might, if you don't think you're getting enough out of it, you could say, could you give me more details or expand on your answer so I can understand better? Okay, so here's a just obvious one. Okay, please give me a brief summary about your personal as well as working background. And it works as an icebreaker. Most people, when they're comfortable and relaxed, most people's favorite subject is themselves. And so you want them to start telling you a little bit about their background. Yes, you've got it on their application. You've got it on a resume, but why not have them mention it again? And you may have asked them some of that on your pre-interview screening interview that you had over the phone that I talked about in the last interview webinar. Then you ask them, so what do you know about our salon? And it kind of answers the question, have they done their homework? What do they know about the salon? Now, if you recruit off your email, they should know plenty about your salon. And so let's say that you know that they were a customer and you ask them, so what do you know about our salon? And they said, well, I've been coming here for 3 years. Oh, yeah, that's right, you have, that's right. And by the way, what's your favorite beds? If they've been coming there for a while, they should know what their favorite beds are. Oh, I like your level 3, your gold level, or whatever level you call it, whatever. I like your level 3. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's been a popular bed. What is it in particular that you like about the bed? What attracts you to keep going back to it? You see the question, the probing question there? It gets people to start opening up about things that they know about, start to lower their defense. If I'm the interviewee and you ask me that question and I'm answering on something that I have some kind of knowledge about, I'm not so worried about you judging me then. Okay, so then what were the reasons for leaving your previous jobs? Okay, you probably asked them that in the pre-screening. Ask them again. See if what they answered this time is the same as what they said over the phone. So go through the most recent of their jobs and work backward. 2, 3, 4, whatever, and you're looking for employment gaps and you're looking for reasons why they left. And they may have some very good reasons. And if they say, well, I just didn't feel like I was going anyplace with that job, that I could grow. And then back to my probing question, could you give me more details or expand on that? Why exactly did you feel like you couldn't go anyplace with that job? Had you talked to your supervisor about that you wanted to be considered for a promotion or whatever? But you get the idea. You want to go back to them and have them give you more than just a stock answer. Believe me, you can go on Google and you can, if you're an interviewee, and you can Google questions to answer in an interview. They'll give you all kinds of them, and there's these kind of stock questions. That's why you want to probe off of them. Okay, so also I mentioned here too, you're looking for patterns. Why did they leave one job? I did an interview just about 3 weeks ago, and this lady had worked at 4 jobs, and the last 3 of the 4 jobs she had worked at, she was 21, 22, and the last 3 of the last 4 jobs she worked for, she had said that her employer was very unfair. And sometimes that happens, but when you hear 3 out of 4, it's like my oldest son who could never seem to get out of bed in the morning and go to work. It happens. So probing to get more details. Okay, and this one is always a good one. Who's the best boss you ever worked for? And who's the worst boss? Now, if they say the best boss, I worked for Alan at the dry cleaning, whatever, and he was my best boss. My worst boss was Lisa at Victoria's Secret. Don't let them just give you the answer. Have them explain why they were the best boss, why they were the worst boss, whatever. and see if what they're describing is something that is are your traits. I had a lady say once, many times over the year, the person I worked for was very controlling, wanted to watch everything that I did. And I probed on those questions, probed on that question, and found out that um, she was not very good with computers, and that might have led to the boss maybe looking over her shoulder a lot. But so, best boss, worst boss, see if that's who you are. What in your life are you most proud of? This is a question that surprises a lot of people. I've given so many seminars and webinars over the years, and live, and of course on the internet. And people say, "Well, that's kind of a real personal question." Yeah, it is. It's a very personal question, but it shows me, do they have some good self-esteem? If someone says, "Well," and this was honestly the answer, someone said what they were most proud of is they've gotten to the point in their life they're not living with their parents anymore. I, I'm I'm not making these things up. All the questions and all the goofy answers I'm going to show you in a minute actually happen. But it shows, do they have good self-esteem? I want to hire somebody that has good self-esteem. As I talked about in part one of this series, I want somebody that's got a little swagger. I want somebody that's got, I'd rather try to control someone's ego that may seem out of control than to try to plant dynamite under somebody's butt and get them to show some energy. Okay, so what are you most proud of? A lot of times we'll get, a young lady might say, well, I've raised a child all by myself and did this and did that. I'm impressed with that. Or I have had a child, but I went and got my associate's arts degree, or I went on and got my 4-year degree, whatever. Okay, I'm impressed with that. Or I'm a single mother, but I've had this job now that I'm working at, or had been working at until they closed because of COVID, for 4 years. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I want to see. I want to see if they've thought about what they're proud of. Remember, everyone is their own best subject to talk about. Me, if you ask me what I'm proud of, you're going to be listening for 2 hours. I could also tell you some things that maybe I wasn't so proud of. Was married and divorced twice, but the third marriage, Christy and I have been together for 30 years. I'm very proud that I finally became a really good husband. Okay, so see, there's commonality now. See, I'm sharing something with you. How did you handle a dissatisfied customer? Notice the question there is, how did you handle a dissatisfied customer? Not how would you. How would you doesn't say to me what they did in the past. And they should be able to, if they've worked in retail, and you don't want to hire a rookie, somebody that hasn't worked in retail service, not fast food. But if you hire them, they should have handled a disgruntled customer in the past, and they should know what to tell you, how they handle it. And then you can think about their answer and say, okay, I guess that's pretty good. Or, and I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of a real bad one here in a minute. Okay, so more good ones. I like this one. Do you think job rules should always be followed? That's kind of a scary question for some interviewees, but by this time, we hope that we have some commonality and they're relaxed. And tell me, in your past work, do you think that job rules should always be followed? And I'm sure they're going to think there might be a trick question in here, but see what they say, because somebody that's really good at retail might be able to balance their initiative in helping a customer instead of just subordination to company rules all the time. I'll tell you what, I've ran, I don't know how many salons beside being a consultant to salons over 30 years. And if somebody would say to me, I know there's a rule that for some reason we're not supposed to hand out upgraded, free upgrades, but if they did, to keep a customer or sell them up to a higher level for a 30-day unlimited or an EFT or whatever, I want that person working for me. I want that person looking at it and looking at the history of the customer and taking the initiative. There is something in the HR business we call initiacide. It is a homicide of initiative. And if you glue your employees down to the rules so tightly, what they're going to do is they're going to sit on that stool. They're going to handle each customer that comes in just by getting the bed ready and turning it on, and they're not going to do anything else. You want to reinforce, which is also what we'll be talking about when I get to talking about motivation, is you want to reinforce their initiative. Initiative is what takes a salon performing at a B level and takes it right up to an A level. You got everybody taking initiative of how they can better serve the customer and make more money on that customer, you're doing well. Okay, now, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Now, you can't ask, it's pretty, I think in just about all the states, it's illegal to ask, have you ever been arrested for a crime? Because an arrest is not a conviction. So I wouldn't ask them if they've ever been arrested for a crime. But have you ever been convicted of a crime? And the circumstances should determine their candidacy. I had a man that I hired years ago, and he shared with me that he had been convicted of manslaughter. And I thought, well, this is going to be an interesting interview. But when we got into the details of it, and I confirmed it with a parole officer, he got convicted of manslaughter because some guy had raped his 8-year-old daughter. And you can imagine what he did to the guy. Well, after considering that, knowing that I have 4 children and 9 grandchildren myself, and confirming his story, I hired him because I'd probably done the same thing. Now, next question. Outside of any physical or mental disabilities, you can't ask them if they're, okay, let me start over. Outside of any physical or mental disabilities, were there reasons for some absences or tardiness with past jobs? And you can ask that. You can't ask them if they're physically disabled because that's the Americans with ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. You can't ask that, but you can ask outside of any physical or mental disabilities, were there any reasons for some absences? Now, will they tell you the truth on that? Maybe, maybe they won't. Sometimes they do. It's amazing what they will tell you. Again, they're comfortable now. They're supposedly relaxed. You've got some commonality, some rapport between the two of you, and they may tell you the truth. I'll show you an example of that. Okay, tell me about a time you had to sell an idea or yourself to someone else. This is really huge. Tell me about a time you had to sell an idea or yourself to someone else. I'm trying to sell myself to you right now, to sell to you that I'm competent in what the heck I'm talking about. So I'm trying to do that. We sell people, we sell each other, they sell us every day. But when it comes to selling an idea or yourself to someone else that's not your cousin or not your brother or sister, sometimes you got to sell them, or a mother and father, whatever. See if they can give you an example. Now, as we go through these questions, if you get to a point where they're hesitating because they've never had this question asked for them before, don't let them sit there and be scared that they haven't answered it yet. Just say, tell you what, I know I surprised you with that question. Just hold on to it and I'll come back to it. Gives them a chance to think about it, okay? This is not a time where you're saying, sell this pen or I'm not going to hire you. No, have them relaxed and tell them what they really think. So, but I like that question because that's kind of where we say where the rubber meets the road. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what I call the not so magical moments of interviewing. When interviewing produces a response or a series of responses that says, I'll pass on this. Over my career, I always saw interviewing as mentally, as there was a giant trapdoor there and I had this big lever. Of course, I never told the interviewee that, but they'd get to a point where they were saying something that was, I thought, oh, I can't hire this person. And I wanted to find a way to get out of the interview as quick as possible. Had this big lever to pull that kind of flushed them away. Okay, so here's some responses when this happens. And this is just an example. Okay, real life examples of actual bad answers, the magic moments of interviewing. I said before, I said, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And this person said to me, yes, I'd rather not speak about it because DUIs are embarrassing. And I remember when she said this, it wasn't a DUI, it was embarrassing. DUIs, plural, was, is embarrassing. Okay, my father was an alcoholic. So I can appreciate how some people get addicted to things. Fortunately, I went just the opposite way. I think so far this year, I've had one beer and 2 glasses of wine. That's about it for me. But sometimes people do get addicted, whether it's drugs or drinking or whatever. Could be smoking. Um, so look at sometimes it happens. They get tied up in something and that they shouldn't, and uh, if it's a DUI, but if they get multiple DUIs, then you start to ask yourself, are they being responsible for their life? Would you continue to have this problem if they did this in the future? Okay, next one. Outside of any physical or mental disabilities, were the reasons for some exceptional absences or tardiness? And this person said, I did have some problems waking up. This is a college student. Hate to pick on him, but I after a standard alarm clock, I've gotten better now. Well, good. We're really glad to hear that. But it gives you pause. And actually, in that one, I think the probing question was, well, tell me how you've gotten better. Now, back on the drinking question, the DUI, I don't know if I probed on that to see if they had. Oh, I think I may have said, oh, okay. So, had you considered? I did. I said, had you considered counseling, because alcoholism is not considered a disabling health feature. So, but it's just normally you wouldn't ask them if they're an alcoholic. But I think I asked this person if they considered counseling, and they went into some details on it that didn't make sense to me. Down here in this one, mental or physical disabilities, when the applicant said, "I've gotten better now," I asked the question, well, okay, so how did you do that? What do you mean you've gotten better? How did you do that till you were better? Okay, some more. How did you handle a dissatisfied customer? I love this one. I had a customer once who kept arguing that she had gotten bad service from me, and I kept telling her she was wrong, because we all know that works, telling a customer they're wrong, until she finally accepted what I said. This, by the way, this is a tanning salon employee. Sometimes you must be firm with customers or they'll push you and your policies around. Now, there are occasions in the tanning salon business, as we know, that customers are a pain in the rump. And sometimes you do have to be firm with them, but never unprofessional. I had a lady almost 11 years ago who was a salon manager, got into an argument with an employee, or excuse me, with a customer, jumped over the counter and actually cold cocked the customer. Yeah, hello lawyers. Okay, next, who's your best boss and why? I love this one. Love this. You get so shocked sometimes you hear this stuff. My boss at the hair salon, we became involved. I don't think she was talking about shooting baskets at the Y, but it worked out good for the job because we knew each other so well. Yeah, yes, you obviously did. And I said, well, then my probing question is, did the other employees accept that situation? And she said, well, a few of them did not, but they left, and the rest of them were fine with it. Right. The rest of them were fine with it because they wanted a paycheck. They didn't want to try to get involved with you and your boss that you were involved with. Next one, where are you available to start this job from other employment? Oh, I can leave them anytime. You hear that? That's when that big handle comes out. Goodbye, because they're going to do the same thing, have the same attitude with you. Okay, some other bad moments. Tell me about a time you had to sell an idea. I had to convince my boss once not to fire me. Is that what you mean? There's an opportunity for a probing question. I would ask, can you elaborate on what happened and how you resolved the situation? In other words, what was the reason he wanted to fire you? And how did you work it out with your boss? How did you convince him? Because it also answers that question about how did you sell yourself? There may be a good reason why she wasn't at fault and the boss is at fault. Not all bosses are perfect. We know that. What are you most proud of in your life? Well, I don't live with my parents anymore. I told you about that one before. I thought that was cute. What have you accomplished in your life that has made you happy with yourself? That's another one I like to. It's kind of like how proud. She's finally getting off my medications. Now, in that case, you would not want to step over the line and ask about what medications, because really, how does that satisfy performing the core functions of the job? you might be curious, and you might want to think, well, how many Percocets does she take a day or something like that? I just wouldn't. But this person answered it that way, and I just didn't want to touch it, so I didn't probe on that one. But during the interview, I could tell that she was a little glossy-eyed, and I didn't think she was quite with the interview, so I didn't hire her. Next one, let me ask again your available hours. Now, this is something you ask in the screening, the pre-screening. Let me ask you again about your available hours. When can you work? And the applicant says, well, since we talked before, which was over the phone, I've taken a part-time job on the other side of town, and I'm taking some credit hours now of cosmetology school. But I can work any other hours. When they tell you this, it's crazy. If they have a full-time job and they want to work for you 15 or 20 hours a week if you're looking for a part-timer, and they have specified in your pre-interview screening call hours and days they could work, great. If they repeat that in the interview, good. You've got something that's consistent. But if they say, well, you know, this has changed and that has changed, and I've added more things to both my social and business life or whatever, you're going to have a problem getting them to show up for work. Okay, so the obvious probing question there would seek specifics on when she's in school and on the job. All right, next. If the interviewee shows up, this is bad in first impressions, with an excessive amount of body piercings or visible tattoos. Now, some of you that are on here are going to be younger, and you're going to say, oh, no, we should have the freedom for our own self-expression of our body. You sure should. And the customer has the freedom to not want to buy things from you if you look like a roadmap of Delaware. The body piercings and the tattoos, you know, I'm of that older generation that doesn't believe any of this. This is as close to a body piercing I get as my headphones here. But the idea is that when you're going to show up for an interview, it's called Dress for Success. It was a famous book that came out years ago, and I wish the younger generation would look at it more. If you're going to have a bunch of tattoos, have them covered up. Body piercings, I would stick to maybe a couple on the ear. And I know that we're getting to a point now where we're accepting a little one here, maybe on the lip, or one little one on the nose, whatever. But the word is excessive amount of body piercings. To show up with a lot of body piercings, looking like they could pick up a good FM signal from a radio station, it shows bad judgment on their part. Anyone who badmouths their past employees or fellow employees, chances are they're going to do it again with you and your salon. I don't, you know, they do that, again, flush them. Any response that shows lack of commitment to work in general. Can I do my homework in between customers? I don't even have to respond to that. You know? Okay, any reference to a desired work schedule that contradicts what they said in their pre-screen interview. Okay, some good magic moments of interview. When they demonstrate enthusiasm for the job, the employees who really love tanning. I had a lady say to me once in an interview, and by this time, I was probably about 80% in buying her anyway, because I thought she's really sharp, whatever. And because we had this rapport going, I think she could pick up on the fact that we were really connecting. And she said, Mr. Farr, if you give me, I love tanning, and if you give me this job, I'm going to show you just how good someone can be working in your salon. I mean, was it BS? It worked out. It wasn't. She was great. In fact, she still is. But when I heard that, I thought, oh my Lord, where do you sign? Come on, lady, can you start tonight? The interviewee efforts at trying to sell the interviewer why she wants the job, which I mentioned above. Good potential salespeople have an outward self-esteem and like to sell. When I see a person sitting there on a chair across from me and they're leaning forward, their body language is that they're really in tune with what I'm saying. And you can see that they're really connecting and they're trying to show me their enthusiasm. I like that. I don't want somebody I have to hire that wants today's paycheck and looking for another job tomorrow. The interviewee comes prepared to ask specific questions about job duties. If I'm interviewing somebody for 45 minutes and usually I'll say to them, hey, if you have any questions, stop me at any time. And to be kind of cute about it sometimes, I'll say, hey, if you got any questions, stop me. If I'm talking too much, which I shouldn't be, take your shoe off and throw it at me or whatever, and they'll laugh and I'll laugh and whatever. But again, it kind of lightens the atmosphere where they feel that they can ask me anything. But if they don't ask me any questions, or if the only question they ask is, okay, so you're going to start me at this amount, when's my next pay review or my next raise going to be? I'd rather start having them ask me other questions, particularly if I recruited them off of email and I know they're a tanner. There's all kinds of questions they could ask me. Okay, I've been tanning here for quite a while, and do you think you're ever going to get another high pressure bed in? Because I know I love that bed that you've got, and I know that other customers would love it too. And sometimes I come here and I have to wait to get into that bed. Those are the kind of stuff that you want to hear. Okay, no questions. I'm concerned. Natural warmth, and I had mentioned before, natural warmth can't be trained. That's much more important than looks, believe me. I had a lady that worked for me out in Los Angeles. Her natural looks were off the chart, just an exceptionally attractive woman. Could have been in movies, but her ego was way over the top. And what she did is she made customers uncomfortable because she looked down at them. So somebody that's got the natural warmth, and again, I had mentioned to you that the book by Gallup Organization, First Break All the Rules, it is an excellent one to have, and it's excellent for you as an owner and for you as a manager to read. It's a great book. Okay, so the better magic moments of interviewing, consistent eye contact that portrays honesty and openness. Someone's not looking at me. I'm not crazy about that. A demonstrated desire for training or redirection. Good self-esteem drives people to learn and progress in their life. You want somebody that is open for redirection and wants to be trained. If somebody says to you in an interview, well, how long is your training period? And they really want to know, and how about training after that? And will I be working with somebody that can show me? I really love tanning, but can I work with somebody that'll show me how to sell? Oh, I love that attitude. Not afraid to make mistakes. When you're talking about their past jobs, and that's one of the questions that's not in this, but it is in the questions list I've got in the vault, that you're asking about. Tell me a time when you made a mistake on the job, and everybody makes mistakes, so you're limiting it to one. And what did you do to learn from them? And that's a great probing question. They should be able to tell you, if they've got self-esteem, be able to tell you, oh, I screwed this up once, but this is what I did, blah, blah, blah. An obvious extroverted interpersonal skills. Do they seem like they want to engage you in sharing information, their information, that they're actually listening to you when you talk about who and what you are and the commonality that you have with them? Does it look like they're actually listening to you and they're into that sharing moment? Are they physically prepared for the interview? Nicely dressed, hair done, makeup complete. I've had people walk in for interviews for selling jobs that were in cutoff shorts or Daisy May shorts, even more so, and an old sweatshirt, and they obviously weren't wearing makeup and lots of studs. I mean, it's crazy. I don't know what people are thinking of. I think sometimes people think that we in the tanning business are desperate. We'll take anybody whose heart isn't stealing, whose heart is beating, doesn't steal too much, and can start tonight. Anyway, so much for my soapbox. Okay, more keys to successful interviewing. Again, don't sell the job until you're sold on them. Present all the reasons they should work for you. Like, we have flexible work schedules, to a point. We have flexible work schedules, but once the schedule is up, and everybody has to, fulfill that schedule. And most smart managers that do their own schedule, they kind of talk to their employees before they post the schedule for the next 2 weeks. So they kind of know if someone's got something coming up. It is the responsibility of your employee to also tell you even before you start to make up the schedule, but sometimes they forget or something comes up that they hadn't planned on. Okay, but you have usually a flexible work schedule. You want to tell them that they'll gain experience in selling and helping people feel good about themselves. That's why we're in this business. We're in this business, yes, to make money, but we're in the business of self-esteem. We sell it. I mean, I don't know why more people in our business don't appreciate that. We are not in the business of pigment augmentation. We're in the business of having people walk out of the salon and feeling much better about themselves. And as long as we do that, the more people will come to us and will keep coming back to us. But we're in the business of selling self-esteem. These are portable skills that we'll give the applicant. So someday when their career isn't with us forever, they can go someplace and they know how to sell themselves and sell people on their ideas. Incentive programs that pay real money. And you could share some average results, but not, of course, any named employee. But you can say, look, you can make some real money here. If we start you at, let's say they're a sales consultant, and again, it depends on the market. I know some markets start them cheaper, but let's say that you're starting a really good candidate, you're starting them at $11 or $12 an hour. You could say to them, you could make as much as $2 to $3 an hour more if you're good at working with customers and selling them. And that's a true statement, because if all they're really making is what you're paying them per hour, because they're not selling anything, doesn't matter what you're paying them then. What you're losing is that opportunity cost because they're not selling anything. And you want to either retrain, or that's a whole different subject. Okay, and the last thing, beside the things that you're selling, of course, you're talking about free tanning. Duh. Please, don't sell your customers, don't sell your employees tanning. Let them have the tanning. Isn't this what we want them to look like behind the counter? We want them to have color. And I can tell you, I'll bet I've toured, I don't know how many hundreds of salons I've toured over the years. And I walk into a salon and I see somebody behind the counter that's whiter than I am. And that's nuts. And sometimes, not that often, but I do know I have a couple current clients that sell higher end tanning, in essence, sell it because the employee has to earn it because their selling is up higher. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I want my employees to be darker, have good color. So I'd give them the free tanning. What does it cost you? It costs you hardly anything. And lastly, I would tell them I'm the best boss that you've ever worked for. Now, if you don't really think that, then don't say that. But remember that the two most important relationships usually an adult has in their life, it's the person that is their mate and the person that they work for. Those are two very important relationships. And there are relationships that, again, having been married twice before my successful marriage, we know they're not always easy. It's not always easy to work for a boss who is, well, if you spell boss backwards, it's double SOB. But when you say, I'm the best boss you've ever worked for, and I've told my employees that for years, I have, because I was the best boss they ever worked for. That is a huge job benefit. Now, hiring, best follow-up, offer letters. I love offer letters. After you've interviewed somebody and you've called them on the phone and you've offered them the job, you tell them when they're going to start, what their wages are going to be, then give them a letter on email, whatever, or if you want to do it on text, a long text, but on email, we say, congratulations, you've been picked as our candidate. We're looking forward to having you come to work for us, blah, blah, blah. We're going to pay this much per hour. You're going to start on this date, whatever. The vast majority of people that are hired in the tanning salon industry never get a letter like this. I can tell you with complete assurance, 100% of the people, when I'm working with the client and they're recruiting and interviewing, and we've sent out that letter, they're blown away because they've never seen anything like this before. Unless they're, they've worked in business for years, where they went to work for a company like I did, CBS or Target or whatever. But it's very, very motivating to know you're going to work for a professional organization, a professional salon or chain of salons that does that. I use a training checklist. If you don't have one, you should get one. There's one in the vault. I talked about my vault. You can see there on the right side of the screen. Keep talking about that. You train in small increments. You don't try to cram everything that they have to know. Thinking that a person will be ready to go in 2 weeks is silly. You can't throw them in the deep end of the pool and walk away. establish the importance right away of sales numbers. Now, they may not be responsible for their own PSA for a while. That's probably good thinking. But you want to establish very early on that sales numbers are very important for their total compensation and also for your feeling of their importance to the salon. Everybody has to do their job. They have to sell customers, and selling isn't always because you're selling them the top, the top bed, top EFT, top lotion. If you go to to my webinars on YouTube, and you'll see essential salon selling skills, you'll see on there that I talk about that. Okay, constructive feedback, often and honest. And lastly, see my complete list of 42 questions at the vault at www.johnrfar. Okay, so speaking of hiring and training, if you need some help with your salon and looking at the forum questions and stuff, and this is not poking criticism at anybody. I guess when you do something for 30 years and you've learned from 547 different salon companies, you figure that you know a fair amount about what you're talking about. If you feel that you're not ready for the end of this year, and Black Friday week is going to be going on this week. I hope that your Pink Wednesday week, whatever you want to call it. But I can tell you by some of the comments on Black Friday week and Pink Wednesday week that people probably should have looked at my YouTube video from last year that talked about that. But there are all kinds of things I can teach you. And so if you need help, then here are some people you should talk to first. Don't talk to me. Don't trust me, as I tell people all the time, because you don't know me. But you look at this list. There's an email and a phone number on there for just a sample of some of my current clients. Give them a call, send them an email, find out if the old dog here knows what he's doing. And once you're convinced with that, then get to me, because I'd love to help you have a successful 2021. And I just messed up the PowerPoint here. Hello. Okay, there we are. Okay, so, but get to me. It's getting a little crazy. We've had many people coming in here, especially with COVID, worried about where their business is going. But yeah, don't you love it? Okay. Yeah, good old PowerPoint. Okay, so the question is it finally time for you, for your salon, for a makeover? And my makeovers are included with just about everything. I will not help you buy equipment. I know equipment. I don't know it as well as some people do. I'm not going to help you with lamps. I'm not an expert on lamps. But when it comes to pricing, EFT design and strategy, marketing, I've been doing marketing for 50 years, HR guidance, which I've been doing for 52 years, staff training, powering up your profits. Just call those people. That sample list I put on there, I'll go back up to it. Just contact any of those people and they'll tell you what the salon doctor, as they call me, knows about this business. Well, thank you for all of the time. This went a little longer than I wanted to. I hope that you got a lot out of this and part one of the art of the interview. And let's hope and pray that this COVID thing does not reach into next year, and we can get by with the balance of this year and with a decent 30 or 45 days. And in January, February, March, we can kill it. That's what we want to do. I mean, kill it like, really have a great peak season. Thanks for watching, and I hope you keep following me. Bye-bye.